first time Sophie's lips turned pale again, I told myself it was just a fluke. She'd been running around outside all morning, chasing our neighbor's dog through the grass in that pink hoodie she refused to take off. When she came back inside, breathless and clutching her chest, I felt the old fear creep up my spine, a silent, familiar terror. Her condition had been stable for over 2 years, thanks to a rigid medication schedule, a specialized diet, and more sleepless nights than I could count. Congenital heart defects don't go away. You just manage them day by day, pill by pill. I checked the bottle immediately. Her name was on the label. The dosage looked right. But something in my gut twisted. Later that night, I sat on the edge of her bed while she slept, the soft hum of her monitor blinking steadily in the dark. I couldn't shake the feeling. Her breathing had been shallow all day. That little crease between her brows, the one that shows up when her chest feels tight, was back. I made a note in the small journal I kept hidden in the kitchen drawer. Wednesday, pale lips, light wheezing. After AM and PM doses, no fever. The entries had stopped for months. Now, they were returning like ghosts. Eric had offered to take over her medication schedule 2 weeks ago, claiming I looked exhausted. "You need rest," he'd said, brushing a hand down my arm like a benevolent caretaker. "Let me help." I'd been hesitant. Meticulous routines were how Sophie stayed alive. But he was her stepfather, and I wanted to believe he cared. Now, I wasn't so sure. I double-checked everything. The expiration date, the manufacturer, the pill shape. I even compared one of the new capsules to one I had saved from an old refill. They looked different. Not dramatically, but enough to notice if you were looking for it. The weight felt off in my hand, the coating duller. I stared at the bottle under the kitchen light, the label practically glowing in my hand. My daughter wasn't getting her meds, and someone had changed them. "Eric, did you change Sophie's medication bottle?" I kept my voice neutral, my back turned as I stood at the kitchen counter, fingers clenched around the ceramic mug I hadn't taken a sip from. Sophie was in the living room, curled under a blanket watching her favorite animated movie for the 5th time this week. Her color was still off. Behind me, Eric didn't answer right away. I could hear the flick of his phone screen, the pause as he processed my question. "Change it," he said finally, his voice layered with faux confusion. "What do you mean, change it?" I turned around, holding the bottle up. "This one looks different. The pills aren't the same. They're lighter, smaller." He chuckled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Babe, you're imagining things. Maybe the pharmacy switched suppliers. That happens all the time." "It doesn't," I replied calmly. "Not without a note. And they didn't switch anything. I checked." He set his phone down a little too hard. "Lena, you've been running on fumes for weeks. You're tired, stressed out. I told you to let me help because I was worried. But now you're accusing me of..." "What? Giving her the wrong medicine?" "I'm saying something's wrong," I said evenly. "And it started 2 weeks ago, around the time you took over her medication routine." Eric's jaw tightened. Just slightly. Most people wouldn't notice it. But I wasn't most people. "She's pale again. She's tired all the time. I don't think she's getting what she needs." "You think I'm trying to hurt her?" he asked, tone shifting from defensive to wounded like a performance cue. "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to," he snapped. "You think you're the only one who cares about her? Jesus, Lena, this paranoia isn't healthy." I didn't flinch. I just looked at him, studying the subtle tension in his shoulders, the way he avoided my eyes. "Okay," I said quietly, setting the bottle down. "Maybe I'm wrong." But I wasn't, and now I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I'd have to stop trusting him before it cost my daughter her life. It happened on a Sunday morning. Sophie was sitting at the breakfast table, swinging her legs and half listening to a podcast about space. Her cereal had gone soggy. She'd barely touched it. "Mom, I don't feel good," she said suddenly, her face drained of color. Before I could cross the kitchen, she slipped from the chair. Her little body hit the tile with a dull, heart-stopping thud. The world narrowed to a single moment. Her lips were blue, her chest barely moved. I screamed for Eric. He came running, wide-eyed and stumbling like he hadn't expected to actually be needed. I was already dialing 911, pressing trembling fingers to Sophie's wrist in search of a pulse I couldn't find fast enough. At the hospital, I stood frozen in the corner of the ER room as they worked on her. Electrodes, monitors, orders barked in rapid succession. I'd seen this before, too many times when she was younger, but this felt worse, different. When the attending physician finally pulled me aside, his face was neutral, too neutral. "We ran a tox panel," he said. "There's no trace of digoxin in her system." I blinked, struggling to follow. "That's her heart medication. What do you mean, no trace?" He hesitated. "I mean, it's not there, not even residual levels." "That's not possible," I said, voice hollow. "She's taken every single dose, twice a day. I've never missed one." He glanced toward the room where Sophie lay unconscious, monitors still beeping steadily. "If she had been taking it consistently," he said gently, "we'd see a baseline level in her blood. We don't. If anything, this looks like she hasn't had a therapeutic dose in weeks." Weeks. The word hit like a blade. "Has anyone else had access to her medication?" the doctor asked carefully. My mouth went dry. My hand clenched instinctively around my purse, where the little medication journal sat, pages freshly filled with every dose, every note, every warning sign I'd ignored. I knew the answer. I just couldn't say it yet. I looked through the observation window at my daughter's pale face, at the fourth line in her arm, and then I looked at Eric, sitting in the waiting room, his hands folded in his lap like he was just another concerned parent. And for the first time, I let myself fully believe what my gut had been whispering for weeks. Someone was trying to hurt my child. I didn't sleep that night. Sophie was stable, but they kept her for observation. I stayed by her side until visiting hours ended, then returned to the house I no longer felt safe in. Eric asked if I wanted tea. I said no. He watched me for a beat too long, then shrugged and went upstairs. I waited until I heard the shower turn on before moving. First, I checked the medicine bottle again. Same label, same child-proof cap, but I emptied the contents into a bowl and studied each pill under the kitchen light. They were identical in shape, but dull, almost chalky, and lighter. I broke one open with a spoon, powdery, too powdery. I slipped them into a plastic bag and labeled it with the date. Next came the kitchen drawer, my journal. Every entry detailed, time-stamped. I took photos of each page and backed them up to my cloud account. Then I pulled out the small black box I'd bought months ago after reading an article on covert home security. It was no larger than a deck of cards. A nanny cam with a motion sensor and enough memory to record 48 hours of footage. I wedged it into the spice rack above the stove, angled directly at the counter where Sophie's meds were prepped each morning and night. It would activate the second someone moved in its field of view. Eric would have no idea it was watching. I also switched the pills in the bottle back to the real ones, Sophie's proper prescription, which I'd kept separately for travel emergencies. She'd start getting the right dose again. Not because I trusted Eric, because I didn't. After that, I crawled into bed beside him and pretended to sleep, breathing slow and even while my mind ran on fire. He had answers. I would get them, but not through confrontation, through evidence, through calm, patient, ruthless precision. The kind of preparation men like Eric never saw coming because they assumed women like me didn't know how to fight back. They were always wrong. It took less than 36 hours. I waited until Eric left for work Monday morning, then pulled the camera from behind the spice rack and connected it to my laptop. I wasn't sure what I expected, maybe a subtle sleight of hand, something ambiguous, but what I saw made my blood run cold. There was no hesitation, no second guessing. The footage showed Eric walking into the kitchen in his robe Sunday night, just after I'd gone upstairs to put Sophie to bed. He opened the cabinet, pulled down her medication bottle, unscrewed the cap, and dumped the contents into the sink, like it was trash. Then, calmly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a Ziploc bag filled with identical capsules. He refilled the bottle, replaced the cap, and returned it to the shelf without a trace of urgency or guilt, like it was routine, like he'd done it before. I paused the video, staring at his face in the grainy frame. His expression was blank, focused, calculated. I saved the footage in 3 separate cloud accounts, plus an encrypted USB I slipped into the lining of my purse. Then I printed still frames, labeled them, and filed them into a manila envelope along with the fake pills and my journal notes. My hands weren't shaking. Not anymore. I had proof now. Cold. Unmistakable. He wasn't careless, he wasn't distracted, he was intentional, and now I needed to know why. I called in sick to work and spent the day in Sophie's room at the hospital, pretending everything was fine. I read her favorite story twice, helped her color a picture of a unicorn wearing sunglasses, and waited until she drifted off to sleep before stepping into the hallway to make a call. Not to the police, not yet. To our insurance agent. The woman on the other end was cheerful until I mentioned I needed to review the life insurance policies Eric had recently updated. Just routine, I said. I want to make sure our paperwork's in order. There was a pause, then a cautious response. Mr. Carlton updated the beneficiaries about 3 weeks ago, she explained. You're still listed, of course, but the primary payout on both your policy and Sophie's goes to him now. He also increased the coverage amount significantly. My throat went dry. He took out a policy on Sophie? Yes. As a minor, it's legally allowed with a guardian's approval. He signed the paperwork on your behalf, said you were unavailable but had verbally agreed. I hung up politely, professionally. Then I stood there staring at the pale blue walls of the pediatric hallway, barely breathing. Eric had insured my daughter's life, and mine, and he'd made himself the sole beneficiary. It wasn't about resentment or control or even spite. It was about money. My daughter was worth more to him dead than alive. So was I. And now I wasn't just documenting a betrayal. I was building a case against a man willing to kill for a payout, and I was going to make sure he regretted every single second of it. Her name was Carla Dominguez, and she didn't flinch when I laid everything out. The camera footage, the tampered pills, the insurance policies, the journal entries, the faint bruises forming around the edges of my composure. Do you have physical custody documentation? She asked. No, I replied. We're married, no custody agreement. She nodded slowly. That makes this trickier. Until we prove criminal intent, or until a court intervenes, he has equal parental rights, which means if you accuse him outright and he gets spooked, he could file for emergency custody, or worse, vanish with her. My stomach turned. I have enough to go to the police, don't I? Yes, but I don't recommend that, not yet. Carla's voice was steady but steel sharp. You're building a case. Don't stop now. You need more footage, more evidence. Track everything. Communication logs, bank records, behavior patterns. We need to prove 2 things. 1, that he is knowingly endangering Sophie, and 2, that you are the sole responsible parent. And until then? She leaned back, her expression unreadable. You act like you know nothing. You let him keep underestimating you. Play the role. Let him relax. How long do I play it? Just long enough, she said, to hang him with his own rope. I left her office with a flash drive full of legal templates, a plan scribbled in my notes app, and a knot of cold certainty forming in my chest. He wanted to get rid of us. So I'd give him what he wanted, a version of me he'd never see coming. I smiled more that week than I had in years. I made dinner. I laughed at Eric's jokes. I handed him Sophie's meds each evening like nothing had changed. And when I kissed his cheek goodnight, I let my lips linger, just long enough to keep up the illusion. He bought it. He always had. Meanwhile, Sophie's real medication came from my best friend, Dana, who dropped it off each morning in a nondescript vitamin bottle I kept hidden in my purse. I logged every dose, every side effect, or lack thereof. Her energy came back. The color in her cheeks returned. And Eric didn't notice a thing. I also added a new detail to the game. My own vitamins. Just a basic supplement. Nothing major. I left the bottle on the bathroom counter, casually visible. Then I emptied it, refilled it with placebos, and waited. 3 nights later, the pills had been swapped. Slightly different shape, different weight. He wasn't even trying to be subtle anymore. I didn't react, just made a note in my journal and replaced them again, this time with a second hidden camera trained on the medicine cabinet. Let him think I was oblivious. Let him think I was getting weaker. I made sure to cough more, pretend to forget things, rub my temples like I had a constant headache. Eric started walking taller, talking louder, making little comments about how maybe I needed rest or should think about therapy. Let him narrate my decline. Let him think he was winning, because the more he believed it, the deeper he buried himself in the grave I was quietly digging, shovel by shovel, smile by smile. I left the bottle exactly where I knew he'd see it, next to the bathroom mirror, cap slightly loose, a note beside it reading, "Don't forget these. Feeling drained today." I went to bed early, pretended to be asleep. At 11:42 p.m., the camera in the medicine cabinet activated. There he was, barefoot, quiet, surgical. He picked up the bottle, examined the pills, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a second container. No gloves, no hesitation. He swapped half the capsules with something else, then adjusted the label and set the bottle back in place like nothing had happened. I watched the playback twice, slowed it down, zoomed in. There it was, clear, precise footage of my husband intentionally tampering with what he believed were my medications. I labeled the video "Vitamin Switch, Thursday, 11:42 p.m." Then I added it to the folder. It joined the other footage, screenshots of the life insurance policy revisions, stills from the camera catching him dumping Sophie's real meds, and an organized series of notes documenting symptoms, conversations, and dates. It wasn't just evidence anymore. It was a weapon, a case for criminal negligence, for reckless endangerment, for attempted murder. I had what I needed to bury him legally, but it still wasn't enough. Because I wanted more than a conviction. I wanted clarity, closure, control. And I wanted to watch him unravel, one smug, oblivious step at a time. On Friday morning, I told him I had an idea. "A weekend away," I said sweetly. "Just the two of us. Sophie can stay with Dana. We could use the break." Eric bit down a smile like a man who'd just won. "Sounds amazing," he said. "Where to?" I found a cabin, quiet, no cell signal, perfect place to recharge. He didn't even hesitate. He never suspected a thing. Over the next 2 days, I set the stage. I packed the fake medication bottles, one for me, one for Sophie, each clearly labeled, each filled with harmless supplements that looked nearly identical to the ones he'd tampered with before. The cabin itself, not isolated at all. It belonged to Dana's cousin, a retired private investigator. Cameras were already installed, motion sensors too. I told Eric I'd already dropped off Sophie, that the fridge was stocked, that I'd forgotten to bring my vitamins but packed hers instead. He offered to take care of it. Of course he did. What he didn't know was that I'd already alerted Carla, my lawyer, and given her remote access to the surveillance feeds. We had eyes and ears in every room. He switched the pills again. On camera, same method, same expressionless focus. And this time? He crushed 2 of them into a glass of wine he brought me by the fireplace. "I thought you might need this," he said with a wink. I accepted it, toasted him, then casually poured it into the potted plant behind me when he wasn't looking. He smiled like he'd won something. He didn't realize the only thing he'd secured was his final act. We were sitting on the cabin porch when I decided it was time. The fire was crackling. The stars were bright. Eric had poured himself a second glass of wine and was staring off into the trees like a man who thought he'd gotten away with it all. I sipped water, then reached into my coat pocket and pressed record on the tiny device clipped beneath my scarf. "I need to ask you something," I said, my voice steady, "and I want you to tell me the truth." Eric glanced at me, eyebrows raised. "Okay. Why did you replace Sophie's heart meds?" He blinked, then laughed. "What? Where is this coming from?" "No games," I said calmly. "I saw you, on video, dumping her pills, replacing mine, mixing something into that wine you gave me last night." His face shifted, just slightly, and then, like the actor he'd always fancied himself to be, he slipped into a new role, the calm explainer. "Lena," he started gently, "you've been under so much stress, taking care of Sophie, running the house. I was just trying to help you rest." "By drugging me?" "I didn't drug you, not really. I just gave you something mild, natural. You needed to slow down. And with Sophie, it wasn't about hurting her. It was about resetting things." I didn't speak. I wanted him to keep talking, and he did. "You were burning out. I thought, if you had a scare, if Sophie missed 1 or 2 doses and had a little episode, you'd take a step back. I'd take over. We'd realign. You changed her meds to scare me into stepping back?" He sighed, like I was being unreasonable. "I never meant for her to collapse," he muttered. "I was going to put the real ones back. I just didn't expect it to work so fast." I let the silence stretch, and then I smiled. "Thank you," I said. "That's all I needed." He blinked. "What?" I pulled out my phone, opened the secure app, uploaded the entire conversation to Carla and to the detective assigned to our case. "You're not leaving this cabin the way you came in," I said, standing. "Because now?" He wasn't just guilty, he was caught. They came for him that night. 2 officers arrived at the cabin just after midnight, flashlights cutting through the dark like silent swords. Dana's cousin had called it in as soon as Carla forwarded the audio. I watched from the living room window as they read him his rights. He didn't fight, didn't speak, just stood there, barefoot on the porch, handcuffed, stunned. I didn't wave goodbye. By morning, the news was everywhere. Man arrested for tampering with stepdaughter's life-saving medication. Local mother's secret investigation exposes chilling plot. His mugshot spread faster than wildfire. The perfect husband, the grieving stepfather, the loyal provider, exposed. Carla made sure every piece of evidence made it into the right hands. The footage, the confession, the pill analysis, the altered insurance policies, the false signatures, everything. I made sure the rest went where it mattered, his company's HR department. His sister, who'd called me paranoid 6 months ago. His mother, who once told me, "Eric's just under pressure. He'd never hurt Sophie." They all saw what he was, and what I'd had to become to stop him. I didn't speak to reporters. I didn't post online. I let the story speak for itself. But I did return one call. Dana's. "You did it," she whispered. "You really did it." "No," I said quietly, watching Sophie sleep peacefully beside me. "We did. I just made sure he knew exactly who he underestimated." By the end of the week, he'd been charged with multiple counts: child endangerment, attempted poisoning, insurance fraud, criminal negligence. The prosecutor called it a rare case of domestic betrayal with clear, chilling intent. And me, I wasn't just a survivor. I was the woman who made hell feel like justice. The house was smaller, but it was ours. A 2-bedroom bungalow on a quiet street with a wraparound porch and a garden that bloomed defiantly, even in late autumn. Sophie picked out her room, chose purple curtains, and taped up glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling herself. She laughed more now. Her heart medication, the real one, was working again. Her energy was back. The circles under her eyes faded within weeks of the move. I watched her sleep every night for the first month just to reassure myself that the rhythm of her breathing was steady and unmanipulated. Freedom didn't come with fireworks, it came with stillness. No more second guessing, no more cameras hidden in spice racks, no more pretending to be asleep beside the man who tried to erase us. Instead, I poured that energy into something new, a local support group, quietly launched at the library's community center under a bland but powerful name, Families for Safe Healing. At first, only 2 parents showed up, both women, one with a son whose doctor had ignored months of symptoms, another whose ex-partner had tampered with her daughter's anxiety meds to prove a point. They cried when they shared their stories. I didn't. I just listened, took notes, brought coffee, and then I told them mine. By month 2, we had 10 regular attendees. By month 3, a pediatrician and a social worker had asked to speak. We weren't just grieving what had happened to us. We were reclaiming it, one boundary, one meeting, one story at a time. The courtroom smelled like old paper and air freshener, sterile, like someone was trying to scrub away the weight of what it had seen. Eric looked smaller in a suit that no longer fit. He didn't meet my eyes. Sophie wasn't there. She didn't need to be. Carla had made sure of that. She was at Dana's, baking cookies and watching animated movies. I took the stand on the second day, and I told the truth, not with drama, not with tears, but with calm, clear, undeniable facts. How I noticed the changes, how I documented everything, the footage, the tampered bottles, the forged signatures on insurance documents, the night he poured something into my wine and told me it was for my stress. I let the evidence speak louder than any emotion could. The prosecutor was surgical. The defense tried to paint Eric as overwhelmed, concerned, misguided in his attempts to help. But the jury didn't buy it. Not after hearing the recording where he admitted to resetting Sophie's meds. Not after seeing the insurance payout breakdown with Sophie's name typed next to a 6-figure number. Guilty. On all major counts. Child endangerment. Attempted manslaughter. Tampering with medical treatment. Insurance fraud. Sentencing followed swiftly. 15 years. No parole for the first 10. He didn't cry, he didn't speak, he just sat there, lips pressed together, watching the life he'd gambled on fall apart. Afterward, Carla turned to me and said, "You never raised your voice. You just raised the standard." I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because justice didn't always roar. Sometimes it simply stood tall, with a daughter on one hand and a new future in the other. The ballroom was quiet in that expectant, reverent way only truth can command. Rows of chairs stretched in every direction, filled with advocates, doctors, survivors, and professionals whose work revolved around invisible battles, the ones that never made headlines until it was too late. I stood center stage beneath soft lighting and a simple sign, National Conference on Medical Integrity and Domestic Safeguards. Behind the podium, my hands didn't shake, not because I wasn't nervous, but because I finally knew who I was speaking for. At the back of the room, Sophie sat between Dana and Carla, her legs crossed, her hair braided, a small charm necklace around her neck that matched the one I wore. She waved at me. I smiled. And then I began. 1 year ago, I was just a mom with a feeling, the kind that tugs at your gut late at night and whispers, "Something's wrong, even if you can't prove it." I was dismissed, gaslit, told I was anxious, dramatic, overprotective. I was also right. No one moved. Even the note-takers had stopped writing. Medical sabotage doesn't always look like syringes and force. Sometimes it wears a wedding ring, smiles at your child, kisses your forehead goodnight. I saw heads nodding, some eyes glistening. But this isn't a story about fear. It's a story about proof, about documenting, about preparing, about trusting your instinct even when the world tells you to quiet down. It's about what happens when you stop waiting to be rescued and start building your own case for survival. I took a breath. Thought of the journal, the cameras, the wine I never drank. Thought of the 15-year sentence and the 15 years I took back. And I looked right at Sophie. She gave me a thumbs up. He thought he was ending our lives quietly, I said, my voice clear and unshaken. Instead, I gave him a front row seat to the consequences and built a new future without him, one where we never dim our light to survive again. The applause that followed wasn't thunderous. It was something deeper, a slow, deliberate rise of hands clapping in unison, like justice itself had exhaled. Afterward, a young woman approached me, eyes shining. "My sister's going through something," she whispered, "and your story, your calm, showed me how to help her." I placed a hand over hers. "That's the future," I said. "It starts with one of us and ends with none of us ever being silenced again." This story was intense, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.